My hat is like a shark's fin. Deep as blue as my hat is like a shark's fin. Deep as blue as my hat is like a shark's fin. Yeah, as blue as my hat is like a shark's fin. Deep as blue as my hat is like a shark's fin. Deep as blue as my hat is like a shark's fin. Deep as blue as my hat is like a shark's fin. Man-made terror, 100 jaws of death. Battle across my depths, I'll pause your breath. I caught you, you sink down 40,000 leagues. Bleeding to death with no arms and short sleeves.
People, what is up? This is the Shark Attack with yours truly, your friendly neighborhood apex predator, the one and only, the Shark, Sean Williams. As I said last week, I'm going to be taking a break for the holiday. Just going to give myself a week off. But that doesn't stop me from having a lot to talk about, which we do. So with that being said, got a new segment that I'm debuting tonight, and new sound to go with it, where I tackle some hot topics that are going around in wrestling. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the first edition of The Feeding Frenzy.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
So I like the movie Jaws. What can I say? Anyway, first topic is, with The Feeding Frenzy, is of course kind of what the title of this episode's about: nostalgia and a part-time champion. Team Hell No was reunited on SmackDown as Kane came to the aid of Daniel Bryan when he was getting beaten down by the Bludgeon Brothers. And let's face it, nostalgia is always going to be the thing that prevails in wrestling, because it reminds wrestling fans of a different time in wrestling, and some would say better times. Doesn't make it right, though, because frankly, I'm not sure how good this is going to be in the long term. Kane is not going to be a full-timer. I mean, he's already a politician at this point. And this is not going to be good in the long term for Daniel Bryan. Now, a lot of people don't want to see him in tag team action. They want to see him in singles and eventually have a collision with The Miz or have another run with the WWE title. Even though some would believe not only that he may not get another title shot, but the WWE never really wanted him to. But that's more conspiracy theory talk. But the bottom line is, it's good for like a one-night thing, but like I said, in the long term, it's not going to be beneficial for Daniel Bryan, and you're still trying to pick up the pieces of having the Bludgeon Brothers just randomly attack Daniel Bryan because of a certain 7-foot-tall big dope and big Cass getting fired. But, like I said, nostalgia seems to always prevail in pro wrestling, and it just sucks. Now, that leads me to the next topic, which happens to be one certain part-time Universal Champion in Brock Lesnar. Now, I'll talk more about what I think with the storyline later on, but, well, because I know it's one of the topics in From the Mouth of the Shark, but here's the thing. The first two champions for the Universal title, one was Finn Balor, who had to give it up due to injury, and then you had Kevin Owens. Nothing bad with Kevin Owens being the guy. But then you had Goldberg win it. A part-timer. Not a good move. But then you had Brock Lesnar beat Goldberg and take the belt. Worse move. Having Brock Lesnar as the Universal Champion was a bad idea, and keeping it on him this long was an even worse one. Why? Because, unlike Raw, SmackDown has their champion present. Or at least they're a lot more than Brock is, and he defends that belt every month. What's Brock's excuse? Oh yeah, he doesn't have heart and he doesn't have passion. That's the reality check, is that Brock Lesnar is nothing more than a hired gun who's just happy to get a paycheck, while plenty of other guys like AJ Styles, like Bobby Roode, and a whole bunch of others that I could name, they're there because they love this business, because it's their dream, because it's their passion, because they have the heart for it. Brock is just another schmuck that's happy to get a paycheck. And that's all he is. I mean, WWE put the belt on him because they felt he draws money. Yeah, and he's also, in terms of storylines, you have to put a lot of guys on the back burner because you're not having them really push towards anything because your champion is not there. And now you have him with this, I don't know whether it's a work or whether it's real, that now he's not going to defend the belt because there's no competition and there's nobody that can actually match up against him. Work or not, the bottom line is WWE needs to get that belt off of him, and they need to get it off of him fast. Because this has gone on long enough. I'm not a fan of Roman Reigns having the belt, but I would much sooner rather have Roman wear the belt than I would Brock Lesnar. Anyway, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back after this.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Brian H. Waters, and you're listening to The Shark Attack with Sean Williams.
Shout out to my good buddy Brian H. Waters. Check out his show Break It Down with Brian H. Of course, check out The Wrestling Realm. You can find Break It Down on Podbean. And of course, The Wrestling Realm with Brian H. Waters. And of course, my good buddy Dwayne Allen. And that's just about as fine of pro wrestling talk as you'll find on Facebook or anywhere in social media. And of course, it's Eric Bischoff approved, which is just a tremendous honor for both of them, and couldn't be happier for those guys. Other topics that, before I get into the next segment that I wanted to talk about. So Eli Drake has re-signed with TNA. You know, I can understand that. I mean, I don't think WWE really had much of an interest in signing Eli Drake. And also, the fact is that while they've gained a lot of key players, TNA has also lost a lot of key players, and they're not really in a position to where they can afford to lose any more. And the fact is that re-signing Eli Drake is one of the better moves that they could do. So, more power to him for choosing where he feels he'll get pushed. And if TNA is smart, and I know they're calling themselves Impact, but until they actually make an impact, I'm still calling them TNA. But if TNA is smart, they will push Eli Drake. And the other hot topic that's been going on is that with, thank you to JP for showing me to the YouTube video talking about this, where reportedly the contracts of the Young Bucks, Kenny Omega and Cody Rhodes, are coming to an end near the end of this year. And word is, WWE is very high on wanting to get these guys. I can understand that. Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks made themselves the hot commodity. They made themselves prime players for New Japan and for Ring of Honor and in the Indies, and they've made themselves such a hot commodity that the WWE would be foolish to ignore them. And as far as Cody Rhodes goes, you know, this is why his departure from WWE was probably the best thing that could have happened for him. He worked with Impact, then he worked with Ring of Honor, then he's worked some shows with New Japan and of course in the Indies, and you know what? It helped Cody find himself and find the character that he wanted to be and that he was capable of, and it's working. It's worked out so well for him, and I think that the WWE would truly be out of their minds if they didn't make a move for him or as well as make a move for the Young Bucks and for Kenny Omega. I mean, the Young Bucks tried going elsewhere. They tried TNA, and TNA tried to make them something that they weren't. Generation me my butt. But the fact is that the Young Bucks are probably one of the hottest tag teams in the world of pro wrestling right now. And I think that they would make a tremendous impact, whether in NXT or on the main roster. And slowly but surely, the WWE is starting to realize that they need to embrace the future, and they've been doing so with a few guys. I mean, but in terms of with Cody Rhodes and how his departure ended up helping him find himself and make him into the wrestler that he wanted to be. Look what it's done for Drew McIntyre. Hell, look what it did for EC3. So I think this is one of the reasons why I've been wanting to see Dolph Ziggler just leave WWE, is because of the fact that this may help him revitalize his character and find what's missing with him to make him a major star. But that's what I think with those topics. Now, let's go into my mic drop moment.
Let the battle commence!
And of course, my mic drop moment has to go to Raw, and specifically, Sasha Banks versus Bayley finally explode. Now, I think that the way they handled it, this is probably why they didn't have that match take place at Mania this year. I'm not saying it's not a Mania-worthy match, because it definitely is. But it's just with how many women's matches they had taking place, and they were hyping up for WrestleMania this year. I mean, Nia versus Alexa, Charlotte and Asuka in the Battle Royal. You don't want that match getting lost in the shuffle. It's too good to get lost in the shuffle. So, and I got to give credit to Bayley. She showed an aggression that I didn't know she had. I didn't think she was capable of it. Of course, there's one way that I can see it backfiring, and part of it is the fact that the crowd wasn't booing Bayley. They were actually cheering for her, even chanting "finally." But there's another reason why I think it can backfire, and that's what leads me to my question authority moment of the week.
Who's in charge over there? This is aggravating me now. What, I can't count on you people?
Counseling. Sasha Banks and Bayley are being forced to go to counseling, or Kurt Angle has told them they'll both be fired. Are you kidding me? Counseling? What do you think this is? You're going to make a female version of Team Hell No? You got to be kidding. The way I look at it, and call me old-fashioned, but I've always thought that with pro wrestling, if you have a difference, settle it in the ring. So why is Kurt so hell-bent on not having Sasha Banks and Bayley just settle their differences in the ring and just start wailing on each other? Because frankly, that's what they want. And that's what the crowd's wanting, and that's going to be the money match. So why delay it? And so that's why I think it can backfire. Plus, if your intention was to make Bayley the heel, considering how the crowd was cheering for her, didn't really work. And the other question authority moment that I got was, aside from the fact that we had Sasha and Bayley just implode the way they did, and we got a pretty good match out of Seth Rollins and Dolph Ziggler, Raw sucked. Raw was just a complete flatline. And I don't get who the heck was doing that or lined up that card, but I try looking back at that card or that show and just thinking, what happened? Other than those two moments that I mentioned, what exactly happened? Nothing that was actually worthwhile. I mean, Kevin Owens' car getting overturned by Braun Strowman, big whoop. And of course, part of with why Raw stunk, I'm wondering if it was the right move to suspend Ronda Rousey, allegedly. Because first off, she's still working the house shows. Second is that you brought her in because you know she's a draw and you're keeping her off TV. Because basically you don't know what to actually do with her between now and when SummerSlam takes place, which is more than likely when you're going to have Ronda and Alexa Bliss collide. I mean, seriously, that's the best you can do is suspend her? I mean, you can't do an injury angle or or have her like she got concussed or jumped or something like that? That's the best you can do? Is a suspension? Why? Just because she kicked everybody's ass, including Kurt Angle's? WWE logic is just so beyond stupid, and it honestly will make your head hurt trying to understand it. Anyway, before we get to the next segment, we're gonna take one more break. We'll be right back right after this.
This is Brian H. Waters, co-host of The Wrestling Realm and the host of Break It Down with Brian H. You're listening to The Shark Attack with Sean Williams.
Thank you again to my good friend Brian H. Waters, a.k.a. Mr. Main Event. Like I said, make sure you check out Break It Down with Brian H. and check out The Wrestling Realm, with him and Dwayne Allen. Now, that being said, it's time for From the Mouth of the Shark.
Smile, you son of a bitch!
Alright, so, question I got this week was from my good buddy Patrick. How long will Chris Jericho be the Intercontinental Champion in New Japan Pro Wrestling? I don't see him dropping that belt anytime soon. He seems pretty happy with where he is in New Japan. He's pretty content, and talk about how some guys that leave, they find themselves revitalizing their career elsewhere. I mean, look what it did for AJ Styles, look what it's done for Cody Rhodes, and I think Chris Jericho is finding that right now with New Japan, so I think he'll be holding on to that belt for quite a while. Now, let's go to the polls. So, I posted a lot of polls on the Shark Attack group this week, and a lot of you guys participated in that one, so greatly appreciated. The first one that I asked was, who should have stayed in NXT out of the recent call-ups? And the big winner on that one ended up being the Authors of Pain, who have been just completely AWOL for almost over a month now. Now, I listed a few options on this one, and the Authors of Pain was one, Peyton Royce and Billy Kay, the Iconics, were another, Andrade Cien Almas and Selena Vega, Sanity, and Ember Moon. Those were the ones that I had mentioned. Now Billy Kay and Peyton Royce were actually in second on that one. Now, here's why that my vote went towards the Authors of Pain and not towards Billy Kay and Peyton Royce. Kay and Royce have actually had more TV time than the Authors of Pain have. They were on for 2 weeks and then disappeared. While Royce and Kay have had more appearances than those two have. And as far as Ember Moon goes, I think Ember Moon's finding her ground on Raw. And the crowd's liking her entrance and everything. And of course, they can't tire of the Eclipse, and personally, neither can I. Sanity, they've only had one official match so far, so it's too soon to tell. Although I gotta say that I didn't really agree with them losing their first match. But again, it's early. As far as Andrade Cien Almas and Selena Vega, has he had any feuds? No. Has he done anything like in terms of going after a title? No. But he's had TV time, which is more than I can say for the Authors of Pain, and that's why I picked them as the guys that should have stayed in NXT. Now, another question I had was, what's the biggest bust from WCW to WWE? And the big winner ended up being, it was neck and neck with, there were quite a few. There were a lot of people that participated in this one. I mentioned DDP, Dean Malenko, Scott Steiner, and Mark Merrow, formerly Johnny B. Bad. And Mark Merrow ended up being the winner. Now, here's the thing. Did he win the Intercontinental title at one point? Yes. And yeah, DDP held the European title at one point, and Dean Malenko held the Cruiserweight title at one point. But here's the problem, is that Mark Merrow was never over in the WWE. The Wild Man gimmick was never over. Sable was over. It wasn't that she stole all his thunder. She was his thunder. If you had him come out without her, nobody would give a damn. And then you had him do the boxer gimmick, even though, yeah, he was a Golden Glove champion. But here's the thing. There's only one Marvelous one, and it's not Mark Merrow. The only Marvelous one I know was Marvin Hagler. Little boxing history on that one. But here's the thing. At first, I was going to say Scott Steiner because in his WWE run, he did absolutely nothing. They shot him straight for Triple H, and it ended up being god-awful both matches he had against Triple H. But here's the thing. Big Papa Pump was never any good. Even when he was in WCW and he held the world title, Scott Steiner just sucked. He was just Scott Steiner with the volume turned up all the way. And steroided out of his damn mind. And as far as his in-ring work goes, Scott Steiner left his good in-ring work behind the day that he left the days of the Steiner brothers behind. And I'm not talking about the Steiner brothers during the NWO era. I'm talking about the Steiners that were actually good. When Scott Steiner would do the Frankensteiner on a regular basis. That's the Scott Steiner I remember that was actually good. And we have not seen that one in years, even though he's done it on occasion, but we're never going to see that again. So, again, Mark Mero would have to be the biggest bust of anybody from WCW coming to WWE, because after listening to Something to Wrestle with Bruce Pritchard, him and Conrad talked about how when Mark Mero went to WWE, Vince was a big fan of the Johnny B. Bad character. And when he found out that wasn't what they were getting, he was disappointed. And frankly, once Mero injured his leg, that's when things really went downhill. So, again, he's definitely the biggest bust. Next one that I asked in the polls was about Jeff Hardy. Which music should Jeff Hardy have between his current music, obsolete, or the No More Words song that he had during his last WWE run? And rather than tell you what ended up winning on that poll, I'm just going to play this little number for you so you'll actually know what it was. I think we can pretty much agree on that one, that especially after you watch the last thing with him and the Usos, where Jeff Hardy broke out that chorus, and the Usos even joined in, both saying at the same time, obsolete. So let's face it, it's a matter of time before we see Brother Nero return and see him with that song, and trust me, it'll get over. The next question regarding Sasha Banks and Bayley was, who should be the heel in this feud? And everybody seemed to vote for Bayley. Bayley should be the heel in this one. I just don't know if it's going to happen. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think Sasha Banks and the Boss character work better as a heel. I don't know if I could ever see Sasha Banks' popularity to actually get depleted. And I asked this one, a lot of people seem to react to this one. Which moment would you erase from wrestling history if you could? And to name a few things was the Lawrence Taylor versus Bam Bam Bigelow match, Hulk Hogan versus Yokozuna at King of the Ring, which, let's face it, it was not a good match. And this one, which was the big winner, was Vince McMahon holding the ECW title. I've never seen anything that was more appalling and more nauseating than that match, or than seeing that was. I mean, frankly, seeing Vince McMahon with any title belt just makes me want to heave. But that one especially was just bad. The next one that I asked was, what do you make of the current angle for Brock Lesnar that I talked about earlier? And you guys all agreed that the big winner was bad story writing, that they couldn't think of any other way on this one. And this one kind of got a lot of reaction on this one was, aside from the Powers of Pain and the Rockers, which WWF tag team should have gotten a run with the tag titles? And it was between the Orient Express or the Heavenly Bodies. And a lot of you guys said that the big winner goes to Dr. Tom Pritchard and the Gigolo Jimmy Del Rey, God rest his soul, the Heavenly Bodies. And the last one that I had asked was, if you could make one of these moments in WWF, WWE history happen that never did, which would you pick? Now, this one was actually had a lot of reaction on this one. In a close second was Kurt Hennig, aka Mr. Perfect, holding the WWF title. But what narrowly beat him was actually people wanted to see Ravishing Rick Rude as a WWF champion. But although it should go that there were votes for Hulk Hogan versus Ric Flair at WrestleMania 8, which we got denied. But again, a lot of participation with the polls this week, so again, it's much appreciated. And that being said, we're going to wrap things up for the night. I want to thank you guys for listening. Like I said, I'll be off next week, but I'll be back the following week doing more as we head into Extreme Rules. and talking more about there is one other thing I wanted to talk about, and this is just more, I guess, to loosely use, have no soundbite for it, but to loosely use an old Jerry Springer term, my final thoughts. So Tomasso Ciampa is looking to take on Aleister Black, which, in terms of the feud between him and Johnny Gargano, I'm all for this, and I'm all for Aleister Black dropping the belt to Ciampa. And it also looks like Hideo Itami is going to be challenging Cedric Alexander. Again, I'm all in favor of this. Hideo Itami has been needing to prove himself since injury sidelined him very early on in his NXT career. And Cedric Alexander seems to be very over on 205 Live, and I think that's a feud that can carry itself pretty well in the summer. Anyway, like I said, I'm going to be off next week. I want to thank you guys for listening. Make sure you check out my Facebook group, The Shark Attack. Also check out my other podcast, Variety Bites, which I'll have that later in the week. And, of course, make sure you check me out on YouTube and check out my show on Podbean. Anyway, I want to thank you guys again. I want to wish you in advance a happy 4th of July. Be safe out there. This has been The Shark Attack. I'm Sean Williams, and people, I am out of here. Good night now.